Now you have several options for managing Windows Server 2016, and this is pretty consistent for the most part with previous versions. Even the first statement here that interactive management is minimized. There's a heavier emphasis on remote management. In fact, Microsoft goes so far as to say that it's not best practice to do interactive management. With Server Core, for instance, and to an even greater extent, Nano Server, the local management options are actually very limited. So once we've installed those systems and configured network and firewall settings, then everything else, all management tasks, are going to be done remotely. The way that we would do that, graphically speaking, is through the remote server administrative tools. The remote server administrative tools that are available for Windows 10 can remotely manage systems running Windows Server 2016. All right, so we would download and install those on a Windows 10 box, and then we would have to go in and use the add Windows features or turn Windows features on and off in Control Panel in order to turn certain elements on. Primarily, the main management tool with RSAT would be Server Manager. Server Manager in 2016 looks almost identical to what it looked like in 2012. It is going to be the primary graphical tool for managing and monitoring remote systems. And then, of course, we've got the individual MMC consoles that go with a particular role. So if you're trying to manage a domain controller, you'll use the Active Directory Administrative Center or Active Directory Users and Computers. If you're trying to manage a DNS server, you'll use the DNS Management Console, and so on and so forth. Windows PowerShell remoting. You can configure PowerShell on a local client to make a connection to a remote server and then run commands or scripts against those systems. It's possible to load various modules locally, such as those for Server Manager, and then run commands contained in those modules against the remote server. Server 2016 supports a new option of using PowerShell Direct. PowerShell Direct is used to run PowerShell scripts or commands on virtual machines from the actual host system. So I can either be logged on directly to the host or I can connect remotely to the host. But within the host, I can run PowerShell commands against the guest operating systems that are hosted within its own virtual machine. Then you have Remote Shell WinRS. This is a utility or feature that has been around for a while. It's another command line tool. It's a collection of standards-based technologies that allow us to manage server hardware if we're signed in directly or over the network. Server Manager relies on WinRM. Windows PowerShell remoting also relies on WinRM. It's unlikely that we're using Remote Shell directly. We're probably using Windows PowerShell or Server Manager, which is just utilizing it as an underlying technology. We've also got Remote Desktop. You can connect to a remote machine as if you were logged on locally. Remote Desktop is supported on the desktop experience, and it's also supported on Server Core. Remote Desktop is not supported with the Nano Server installation option. And then Group Policy can also be used to manage both Server Core and full installations of Windows Server, just like you can manage any other computer. It cannot also be used to manage Nano Server, so we'll talk about that. I mean, primarily Group Policies is used to configure security settings, configure auditing, event log management, and others. But there's no end to what you can do with Group Policy. So those are the management tools. Now, PowerShell remoting and Server Manager remoting is actually enabled by default because WinRM, like it was in 2012, is turned on by default. We just have to realize that some of the MMC consoles are not, or all of the MMC consoles, are not going to be using WinRM. So things like event log management from Event Viewer on a remote system, service management, disk management, those are going to require some additional ports, and it's because the MMC actually uses DCOM, or the Distributed Component Object Model, in order to make that connection. All right, so there are certain firewall ports that have to be opened up to allow DCOM access in, And then we've got things like remote event log management, service management, disk management, and the like that have to be enabled in order for some of the MMC utilities to work remotely.